members for the Vassar Animal Rights Coalition, and we're really excited to welcome Pattrice tonight. She's a co-founder of Body Sanctuary up in Springfield, Vermont, which does amazing work both in animal rights and LGBTQ activism and beyond. And yeah, she's a speech today. And we're also selling her book, The Oxen of the Intersection, which y'all can pick up after the event at the table. And feel free to get more vegan mac and cheese as Pattrice is talking. We have plenty of it. Yeah, thank you for coming. Welcome, Pattrice.
Thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you said bye, because as usual, I was about to forget to mention the name of my organization, which is really not good for us when we do that. So I have brochures for you to pick up, and also the sign-up sheet for our mailing list. Mine is I'll just say, because before I get into everything else, we're an LGBTQ run, farmed animal sanctuary located in Springfield, Vermont. About 500 animals live, non-human animals live in the sanctuary, along with a much smaller number of human animals. And our sanctuary residents range in size from parakeets to emus, white small egg factory refugees, 3,000-pound sons of dairy cows. And I'd love to tell you all about the sanctuary. And I will tell you some sanctuary stories, but that's not what I was going to talk about today. So I wanted, first of all, say thank you for coming out on this day where it seems like nature is playing a trick on us again. And I noticed also that it is April Fool's Day Eve. So I was wanting you to think about, I'm asking you, though I'm asking it rhetorically, you don't have to answer, what will you do to celebrate April Fool's Day tomorrow? What kind of fool will you be? You willing to be a fool? Maybe a fool for love? You willing to fall for a trick so that somebody else can have the fun of playing the trick? Presumably not her full trick. Maybe you'll play a joke, and you'll know that laughter and joking, that feels good, right? Wait, am I wrong about that? It feels good. All right, so are you gonna, I mean, I want to know this. I'll ask you again, you can actually tell me what you will do for April Fool's Day. I want you to actually celebrate it. Are you willing to be a fool also in terms of being willing to try something? Even though you might, which I probably will do, fall in the attempt. So I actually asked to have the talks scheduled for today, so it would be April Fool's Day Eve. But it turns out that they brought this book that I wrote, so I should mention it because this nice man is selling them. This is the story of an ill-fated campaign to save 2 cows. It's called Bill and Lou, and I call this book a case study in catastrophe because we did not succeed in an effort to save the lives of 2 oxen who everybody agreed never meant anybody any harm. And so I was really, really interested in this question of how come we could, and how come literally tens of thousands of people around the world could not save 2 cows that everybody said were innocent of anything. It turned out I needed a whole book to explain the answer to that question. So about half of this book tells the story of what happened, but the other half is an analysis that shows us how what looked like a really simple dispute about whether or not a college would kill 2 cows and seemed to be about nothing other than that. Turned out to be all about race. You know, it was mostly white people talking to each other about what to do about 2 animals. Also all about gender and ability or disability. And so what I hope that I do in this book is show how we can, it's called the option at the intersection, because what I'm trying to do is help us, those of us who are activists, who are interested in this whole issue of what they call intersectionality, how different forms of oppression intersect with each other. How can we take that out of the realm of academia, off the college campus, and how can we put that into practice in our activism, in the things that we're trying to do to actually change the world? And this is sort of a case study. I show how we failed to do that, but I hope, give enough ideas so that when you're facing a similar situation, and it doesn't have to be about animal activism, this isn't just for animal activists, then maybe you'll be better able to come up with strategies that succeed. So I'll be happy for us to sign it if anybody wants to buy one. So it's apt, since we were fools, that this book is out on the day before April Fool's Day. But also, I want to talk to you a lot about eros. Which is not just about sex, but is about the drive, the wish that we all have for connection, for pleasure. That's why I said jokes. So April Fool's Day is actually all about eros. It's all about having a little bit of fun with people that you like, and I hope we'll do that tomorrow. So, one more holiday to mention before we get to the topic. So this is all just still introduction. Did I say that I'm happy you're here? I can see the snow. It's also Trans Visibility Day today, so I wanted to give a shout out to anybody here who is anywhere on the trans spectrum. Whether or not they're interested in being visible. And that reminds me that a big piece of what I'm going to talk about today has to do with diversity. But not diversity in the weak, tepid sense that it has come to be used by people when they just want to indicate what Angela Davis said, a certain visual effect. But sincere understanding of diversity. The world, as biologist J.B. Howland said, is not only queer. You're coming in right in the middle of a quote.
Sorry.
Slide, and I'll start again. So there's this famous biologist, and we're going to get to some of the things that made him say this. But what he said was the world is not only queerer than we suppose, it is queerer than we can suppose. The diversity that exists within nature and among people is a lot deeper and broader than even those of us who call ourselves embracing diversity often are aware of. And I'm talking about biodiversity. I'm talking about diversity among animals, and then I'm talking about diversity among groups of animals within animals, like human animals, but even within groups, right? Am I making sense? Okay. So that'll be a theme. But I'm also interested, though I'm not sure we'll have time for, in tactical diversity. Tactical diversity, by which I mean when we are involved in activism, not just sort of doing the same thing over and over again in every single situation, just because that's what we know how to do or what it occurs to us to do, but understanding that complex situations will generally require a diversity of tactics, a diversity of people coming at a problem from different angles using different tactics. Make sense? Okay. So the title of this talk, supposedly, is Queering Animal Liberation, right? And you know what that means? I'm so curious to know what you imagined it. For me, it means something different almost every time. I'm going to break that down eventually. But I think, and I'll tell you what I mean when I say queering animal liberation. And it's probably a little broader than you imagine. Let me just have a quick show of hands up. So how many people here would say that they either, like, how many people here are animal advocates or vegan or consider themselves in some way taking some sort of action on behalf of non-humans? Okay, how many people are involved in any way in struggles, in some sort of struggle for social justice? That's nice to see. Okay. And how about environmental? Okay. People are like, I don't know. That's excellent. Okay, good. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tell you what I mean by queering animal liberation. I have to admit that I was changing my mind about what to say up until the last minute, just because at this point I was so much around this constellation of issues to say that it's really hard for me to decide which things to say. And I think that means that it's time to write another book. So I am going to tell you what I mean by that. But I think what I want to do first is bring you at least a little ways along to where I am by telling you some of the stories of how I got to where I am on this. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. So before we met, before the event started, I met with some of the people from Vassar Animal Rights Coalition, and Allie asked me, what was it like to transition from being predominantly a social justice activist to running an animal sanctuary? Because I spent the preponderance of my adult life, well, even before I was adult, starting when I was 15, was when I started doing gay rights work in the 1970s. And I did anti-racist work. I was at the Center for Anti-Racist Education. I coordinated the tenants union, doing things like organizing rent strikes in public housing complexes. There's so many different things I did. The co-founder of Vine Sanctuary, Miriam Jones, and I actually met in the context of the disability rights struggle. So you said, oh, would you like to make the transition? But it wasn't on purpose, right? It wasn't on purpose. So let me tell you how I ended up running an animal sanctuary. And then this will actually, and you get a sense of what it is like to sort of see animal work through a social justice lens, huh? So what happened was that Miriam and I moved to the Delmarva Peninsula. That's a little peninsula that has little bits of Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia on it, so Delmarva. And on this peninsula, this is the place where factory farming of chickens was invented and perfected. On this peninsula, they kill and cut up more than 1 million birds every day. We didn't know that. We moved there, having seen on the internet that the area was an agricultural region. And we were all about getting back to the land. And she was going to She was a school teacher at that point, so she was going to do public school teaching, and I was mostly making my living writing and editing. And it was a low income region because that was the only place we could afford. Right? We were actually moving to a house where we had a whole house and a few acres of land for about half what we were paying, rent a place in the city, right? So we were imagining, fields, agriculture, not little sheds in which tens of thousands of birds are locked up, right? We were vegetarian, in the process of going vegan. I have been vegetarian since I was a teenager. Mary and my old have been vegetarian since moving with me. And we were in the process of going vegan because we'd been given money to some animal groups and had learned about dairy and eggs. And so I was actually in the midst of this anguishing process of not wanting to believe that I'd been going along with so much cruelty for so many years, sexist cruelty in particular, for so many years, and in the process of divesting my diet of that. We certainly weren't animal, and Miriam did a few animal rights sort of protests, I think, but we weren't animal activists by any means. We were social justice activists who had sympathy for animal rights. So we moved to this area, and we're kind of surprised that we were driving past a slaughterhouse on the way to take the dogs to the vet. And then very soon after moving, literally so soon that this happened on the day that we were driving to start our new check-in. So we've been there a few weeks. It was early 2000. We celebrating our 15th anniversary this year. Thank you. So 15 years ago plus, it was a snowy day, but it was maybe early February. Driving to start our checking account, and we drive past the chicken in the ditch. And first we're just like, yay, you got away, good for you. And then we're like, there's snow on the ground. We drive by this bird does. So I stopped the truck. That we got brand not new, but we just bought a pickup truck because you have to haul your own trash. I stopped the truck. I looked at her. She looked at me. We didn't even say we will turn around. We just looked at each other, and then I swung the truck into a U-turn. I got this feeling in my stomach, like, uh-oh, my life is seriously about to go strange. And I don't have time to be here all night to fully describe to you the hilarity of Miriam trying to catch this chicken, right? I mean, she's from Pittsburgh, I'm from Baltimore. She chases the bird runs across the street, she chases the bird, finally she tackles the bird, and comes up and clutching the bird, terrified of the bird. Drive back to the house. She stands out in the backyard supervising the bird while I make some calls. And I call around and I'm trying to find a local animal shelter. And I finally reach a local animal shelter and I say, hey, I found a chicken by the side of the road. What should I do? The woman on the phone said, have a good dinner. So then I was like, all right. So this bird is our responsibility now, huh? And luckily, we didn't realize, we actually knew of an organization called United Poultry Concerns, but we thought they were much further away from us than they were. They actually were about an hour and a half away from us. We could have taken the bird down there, but we didn't realize that. We thought they were so far away. So we blocked off the corner of the garage with baby gates. And I went to the local farm store to get what we needed. And this bird became our responsibility. And we called her Roselle, after my recently departed grandmother, because she had her eyes and also her, I don't know what you want to call her stubborn charm. And there we were. And it was winter, as I said, and we went online and we found out whatever we needed to know. One of the things that we found out was that when the temperature was below a certain level, there would be a risk of frostbite on the wattle and the column. And so what we do, and it was just this one bird in a big drafty garage. So what we do, like on nights when the temperature was predicted to go below that level, was we would put wood chips in the bathtub and bring her in there, right? Because we had dogs, and that was really the only room that had a good door that the dogs could get through. And so you spend some time in the bathroom, right? And it's intermittent time. And so I kind of got to know this bird better, right? And I noticed that she really did have a terrible personality. And also, the bottoms of her feet were like our hands. I don't know if any of you have ever seen a chicken's foot, but they've got 3 toes here, but they've got this puffiness here, and the segments, and then the nails. It's just like a different version of our hand. And of course, I knew that we and birds have a common ancestor, right? Like all animals. I knew that we had a common ancestor. I knew that we had some basic skeletal similarities. I knew that our brains were similar enough that we have pretty much the same structure responsible for consciousness. We have the same kind of limbic system responsible for the really basic emotions like fear, etc. I mean, I knew all that in my head. But this, right, was evidence that we were relatives. So you can guess I kind of liked this bird a lot. And the thing that really surprised me was that she seemed to like me too. Like, she would follow me around when I would be outside doing things. And if I wasn't outside doing things, she would hang out on the back steps, kind of looking lonely. And this was just so amazing to me because I was like I always put bird food in the bird feeders, but I always thought, so I appreciated birds. You know, birds are beautiful, but I always saw the birds and people, like, how could you have a relationship? They're just such different. They're so different. So this was like really amazing to me. And the next thing that was amazing to me was then one time when she was in the bathtub, she starts making like this cackling noise. She makes this cackling noise. And like right away I'm thinking back to all those cartoons I saw as a child, you know, like with the hens cackle after they lay an egg, right? So I'm like, oh my God, she laid an egg. And I'm like, look, no way, okay. And then a couple days later, I heard her make that sound again. And I was like, did she lay an egg? Did she lay an egg? I was running all around, looking under the bushes, trying to see if she laid an egg, because it just seemed so magical to me that a bird could, you know, the whole transubstantiation of sunflower seeds and cracked corn into an egg. I mean, my God. But no egg. Then, one morning, she was back at it in the garage, and I came out to open up, and I heard like these choking sounds coming from inside the coop. Like she was scratching like this. And I thought, oh my God, like she's sick. And what am I going to do? Like, I'm going to find a vet who would take care of a chicken here in this particular part of the country, right? Where they do what they do to the chickens. I'm going to find a vet for this chicken when she dies. Luckily, somebody with a little bit more sense than Mary and I happened to come and visit, took one look at Moselle, and said, that's a rooster. And what it was was that sound was actually proto-crowing. When roosters, which are a lot like adolescent boys, when they're about to, they get this, when they reach sexual maturity, they get this growth spurt, and they suddenly have really big feet, and their voices change, and they're trying, when they're trying, they're reaching, right, but they can't quite get there yet, and that was what was happening. So that was pretty interesting. But here's what was a little bit alarming. My feelings changed. Rooster. I mean, we all know what roosters are like, right? I mean, roosters are arrogant. Roosters are cocky. Roosters strut around, want to rule the roost, right? Roosters are aggressive. But this bird wasn't like that. This was my sweet little moselle. And I had to work really hard. Sweet little moselle seemed a little bit confused about why I was a little bit more distant for a day or two. And so I had to work really hard not to let the stereotypes interfere with how I saw this bird. I had this really clear sensation that I was looking at the bird through stereotype colored glasses. You see what I'm saying? And I had to sort of take them off or something. I can't follow the metaphor with the glasses for too long. But I had to do something to clear those stereotypes away from my eyes and see this particular bird as someone who was not particularly any of the things that they call roosters. This was really interesting to me. Not just interesting, but upsetting to me, because I don't like being tricked by stereotypes. I like being tricked by April Fool's jokes, but I do not like being tricked by stereotypes. And I certainly don't like stereotypes getting in the way of my relationships. So I was actually mad about this, and that made me really think about it. I was really thinking about it. I was really thinking, where did I get this idea? Where did I get this idea that roosters are like this and like that and the other? I told you I'm from Baltimore City. Right? No chickens there. And it's not like my grandmother sat me down at the dining room table and said, now let me tell you, roosters are this way, but hens are like this, right? I mean, it's certainly possible that children in more rural circumstances would have their parents teach them about chickens, but no one taught me anything about chickens, and yet I had this very clear idea in my head about roosters being this, that, or the other, and I'll bet many of you did too. Where did I get that? Children's cartoons, children's books, movies. This got me thinking a lot about the ways that we use animals in the process of the social construction of gender. Social construction of gender is the process by which people, as a group, decide, okay, we're going to attribute these features to maleness and these features to femaleness. We're going to call this feminine, we're going to call that masculine, right? And gender systems only work, certainly binary gender system only works, if you believe that this is natural. We're more natural than animals, right? There's this deep association between naturalness and animals, right? So basically, what's going on here, and if you think about it, unless you've only been exposed to the most recent children's literature, if you think about it, you know I'm right, that that our media for children depicts animals in highly gender stereotyped ways. It's not just roosters and hens. Depicts animals in highly gender stereotyped ways. It depicts the heroic male or the aggressive male, the nurturing mother, and yes, the docile female, the flirtatious female, yes, and those pieces of children's literature are teaching us something really important, although wrong. They're teaching us to perceive the world in this gender binary, and they're teaching us that these ideas about which personality characteristics go with which are natural. We use animals to socially construct gender. And it's not just in media. We do things to animals that trick them into acting out gender stereotypes. Cockfighting is a perfect example of that. The strong association between roosters and masculinity in many cultures dating back 3,000 years. It's not only in English that the word cock has two meanings. There's a really strong association between roosters and masculinity. In cockfighting, roosters are essentially tortured and traumatized into acting out our stereotypes of masculinity, which is that males are inherently aggressive. And then you've got to let them fight, because that's what men do. And I don't have time to tell you more about cockfighting, but I will say, I was supposed to promote the sanctuary, that because of these thoughts about stereotypes and gender, at the time we started the sanctuary, it was believed that fighting roosters were so incorrigibly aggressive that when they were seized by authorities, because cockfighting is mostly illegal, that when they were seized by authorities, they would just have to be killed. That they couldn't possibly live peacefully with each other or even with other chickens. And we decided, on the basis of our experiences with not only the very first rooster, but lots of roosters we got to know, that we didn't actually believe that stereotype. And that we were willing to test it out. And so what we did was we came up with a process for rehabilitating former fighting roosters, giving them the opportunity to learn the social skills by which roosters in the wild mediate their disputes. So that they could, and also to just detox emotionally and physically from the experience of being in cockfights. So to be able to see other birds without being terrified, because we were fighting from terror, not aggression, actually. And so we became the first sanctuary to build a form of roosters, and we continue to do. And we told other sanctuaries about it, and now other sanctuaries say fighting roosters. And there was just now a big bus down in North Carolina, and there's Carolina Waterfowl Rescue's got 100 birds, and they're not being immediately killed. They're looking everywhere they can to find places for them. So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that I started to think about these stereotypes, and that led me to a really interesting recognition that this use of animals in the social construction of gender is something that hurts both animals and people. It hurts us by naturalizing the gender binary. And it hurts them through cockfighting and many other different ways that animals are forced into living out our ideas about what they are supposed to be. Does that make sense? Okay, so that was the first bit of knowledge that I gained from the animal sanctuary. We grew pretty quickly into a refuge for mostly for chickens. And we're up to between 100 and 200 chickens at a time on our couple acres of land. We have a couple buildings. And then one time, I went away to give some talk somewhere. I was away for a long time. There was a bunch of talks. When I came back, Maria was late to pick me up from the airport. She said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I had a hard time getting the ducks in." I was like, "Ducks? The ducks? I don't know if any of you have heard of foie gras." Oh yeah, you're in New York. So that's that revolting product that is created by force feeding ducks and geese until their livers develop a disease called fatty liver disease. In the early 2000s, there was an open rescue at a foie gras factory, actually here in New York. Huh?
That's about far.
Correct.
Not far from here.
Okay. And there's a video of that. It's called Delicacy of Despair. And you can still see it online. At the end of the video, you hear that the birds the people who, at open rescues, when they go in with video, they film, and they carry away, and they do who they can, openly, saying that this animal is in need of veterinary care, and they're begging them to do that. And at the end of the film, we'll see that they say that birds are now in a safe place. Well, we were in a safe place. We weren't able to say that originally, but we didn't say that. And so we got to know ducks. And I don't know how many of you have ever known ducks? Some? Yeah, I read some study that says for people that eat cartoons, ducks are their favorite animals. Because they're just so, and they are. I mean, most of the time cartoons are not right, but I mean, at least the cartoons where they show the ducks, and just being so active and talky and interested in everything, that is ducks. That is ducks. They're so sociable. They're so interested in everybody. And these ducks in particular, particularly gregarious. We just loved them so much. I mean, they had been through such trauma. And they were so friendly to all the chickens, and even like kind to the little injured chickens who would come in after falling from the poultry trucks. They even adopted this one little rooster we called Chumbawamba, because, you know, that song, I get knocked down, get back up again. Yeah. Some of you do. So he had, when he came to say he had a broken leg, he had a broken wing, he had a broken knee, and he still, like, healed, although he always had a limp. And the ducks just adopted him, so you can see 4 ducks and Chumbawamba would be behind him. It was beautiful. So we were really happy that we had gone ahead and expanded. And we had some ducks in one barn and some ducks in the other, because unfortunately we didn't have enough room to have them all together. But we looked at them really carefully and trying to pay attention, like who was friends with who, you know, before assigning them to the different barns, right? So I was really surprised that when I come out one day and 2 of the ducks are fighting. And I'm like, ducks? There is no fighting here. This is a sanctuary. Even the fighting roosters don't fight here. You cannot be fighting at the sanctuary. And as I'm talking to them, I'm figuring out like who's the aggressor and who's getting the worst of it. And I took the one who was getting the worst of it and I carried him into the other one, right? So he'd be safe there from this aggressor. And so I do a few more things, there I clean some coops, whatever. About an hour went by. I turn around, and there's the one that I had rescued. And they're talking really friendly through a fence that the one who was the victim was like trying to climb to get back over. And that might not sound remarkable to you, but let me tell you, because of where these barns were situated, what he had to do to get to where I saw him was walk through the yard, climb like a 6-foot fence, walk through a small woods, make a sharp left turn, walk down the road, make another left turn, walk up the driveway, and then climb another fence, which he was in the process of doing when I saw him. Okay? So I was like, wow, I guess I was wrong. You 2 really are friends. Maybe you're just having an argument, whatever. I didn't break up your friendship. Fine. I lifted him back over the fence so he could be with his friend, and I went about my business. Hour later, I come out to put down some fresh bedding, and the barns are fighting again. So I take him away, put him in the barn, put down the straw, do a few other things, turn around, and this time he's back again, and this time he's actually making it over that last fence. So again, he had walked through the field, climbed the 6-foot fence, through the woods, left turn, another left turn. Okay. Back in. This happened 3 times before I literally hit my head with my hand and realized that wasn't fighting. It was sex. They were boyfriends. And we call them Jean Paul and Jean Claude. Because they both it was because they both had like they were white guys and they both had these little black berets. And it turned out that they were partners. They were partners for life. They turned out to be partners for life. They slept together. They did things together. I'm not saying they were monogamous, because ducks tend not to be. But they were together for life. So much so that in 2009, when Jean Paul finally succumbed to the liver disease that's so common among these ducks, a week later, the other, who had been perfectly fine, also died. And I almost broke them up. Right? I almost broke them up. Me, somebody who had done all of this queer activism for all of her life, somebody who had even read this book called Biological Exuberance. It's this thick. And it spells out the 300 different varieties of non-human animals who engage in same-sex partnership, sex, courtship, pair bonding, and family raising, right? Did you know that? If you didn't, now you know. More than 300, that's just documented. Animals, mostly birds, lots of birds, naturally engage in some sort of homosexual behavior. I knew this, and yet, my stereotypes, the stereotypes bred into all of us from years of nature programs that portray non-human animals as if they were reproducing automatons whose every behavior is determined by the desire to get their genes into the next generation. Right? That had influenced me so much that it took me 3 times to recognize sex as sex rather than fighting, and to not split up these very devoted ducks. So that got me thinking too, obviously, about all of the ways that speciesism and homophobia or transphobia intersect. If we see animals as these reproducing automatons, right? They're just programmed by their biology to do whatever they can to mate and reproduce, right? Wouldn't you say that is a common theme in many nature programs, right? Well, if that's all that animals are, that's pretty robotic, isn't it? Having that view of animals, it makes it a whole lot easier to lock them up in a vivisection lab, right? I mean, what if you have to admit that animals have sex with each other just because they want to? That they form pair bonds that don't have anything to do with raising children? That they adopt children that aren't even theirs and raise them in same-sex pair bonds? Well, then we've got to admit, I mean, if they're having sex and there's no reproduction involved, that's got to be for the pleasure, right? And if we admit that animals are having sex just for pleasure, they have feelings. They're pair bonding for reasons, and it doesn't have anything to do with raising kids. That suggests that there's some kind of feeling there. Then it becomes a lot harder to lock them up in vivisection labs or foie gras factories. to interfere with their reproduction in the way that every single use of animals interferes with their reproduction. Right? I mean, those who are animal, think about it. No matter what use of animals we're talking about, whether it's zoos, whether it's farms, whether it's circuses, whether it's SeaWorld, animals, before they get to the being abused as adults part, well, we're brought into the world. How are they brought into the world? Through forced reproduction, right? No captive animal is allowed to opt out of compulsory heterosexuality. Their owners decide who they will mate with, whether they will mate, and who they will mate with, and then also get to decide what happens to the kids, regardless of what mom thinks. So this is patriarchy as well. And this is an element of every single kind of animal abuse. It goes right to the heart of homophobia. But and associated reproductivism. But it hurts people too, right? I mean, those of us who have done any sort of LGBT work are really familiar with the second most common reason people give for hating on queer folks. The first most common one, of course, is God said so. Is what? God said so. And the second is, it's not natural. Right? So when we deny the truly queer diversity of sexual expression in non-human animals, what we're doing is setting the stage to say that homosexuality is an unnatural aberration. And that hurts, right? So we have another one of these junctures. Make sense? All right. How long have I been talking? Are you bored? So I'm telling you the story essentially of 2 areas. Okay, so we were there on the Delmarva Peninsula for 9 years. Tiny little sanctuary surrounded by factory farms. And we ran it together for a while. And we continued to run it together and live together even after we weren't partners. But it was clear when we weren't partners, eventually someone would want to live somewhere else. There's a couple of somewhere else. And sure enough, that was Miriam. So then she moved off-site to live with her partner, Aaron, and nearby, about an hour away. And then I ran the sanctuary by myself for a few years. And burned out. And as I was in the process of burning out, our well was in the process of drying out. And they were in the process, and I was in the process of deciding that the Bible Belt really wasn't the best place for us to live. It was really hard to run a sanctuary there because we weren't near anybody. Any sources of support, any sources of financial support, any sources of volunteers. So we thought long and hard, and we all three decided we wanted to get out of that region. And so what we decided to do was relocate the sanctuary. We chose Vermont because we always had a wish to expand specifically in the direction of offering refuge to survivors of dairy, which we had also come to see as a particularly horrific violation, sexual violation, in terms of the forced breeding anyway. And we really felt like neither feminists nor animal activists paid enough attention to dairy. And we wanted anything that we did to be really grounded in what actually goes on. So we chose Vermont because it's dairy country, like this area is too. I drove past some places on the way. Remove the sanctuary. Now we're big, but in between there, so I took a break. Since I've been running it for myself for a while, Aaron and Miriam decided they'd run it for a while to give me a break, and I went to Minneapolis where I was teaching. And one of the classes that I was teaching, there was a course called The Cultural Politics of LGBT Politics. That's what it was. And what I wanted to do when I wanted to teach this course, what I wanted to do in teaching this course was to make it fully ecological, to take into account the new thinking on what's called queer ecologies. I wanted to do a lot of things. So I started looking for textbooks. Those of you who aren't, I don't know if you know, but you have to choose your textbook. You're going to choose, right? So I had a little checklist in my mind of what I needed in a textbook, right? And what I needed in a textbook was a textbook that at least made some reference to the fact that non-human animals engage in homosexual behavior as well, right? Some reference to that. Or I would settle for some reference to the new evolving thinking on queer ecology. Huh? And I also wanted a textbook that wasn't just US-centered. I wanted a textbook that would really take us through the diversity of human sexual expression, not just across geography, but across time, right? There was no such textbook. There was no such textbook. I looked at every single textbook available for, say, an introductory level or any level of gay and lesbian studies course, and I could find none that made any reference whatsoever to the non-human world, first of all. And I don't think animals or ecology, none. Not there at all. Second, the ones that were international in scope, just as cursory. And mostly focused on like people doing US-style gay rights activism in other places, as opposed to, say, indigenous ways of thinking about sexual, what we call sexual orientation, and different forms of activism. So I felt really frustrated, but also really challenged. And so what I did was I spent weeks combing through scholarly journals and some non-scholarly and scholarly books and other publications, and pulling out articles and chapters until I had essentially made a textbook of PDFs that started with queer animals, ended with queer ecology, and took us on a world tour of queerness through time and space in between. And I want to share with you, although obviously since this was a semester-long course, I can't tell you all the things that we learned, but I want to give you a sense of some of the things that we learned, because they may or may not be things that you have learned. One of the things that came up again and again, my students were, of course, mostly LGBT folks, because that's who are really interested in that course, but not all. Many of them were very active in the trans movement, in various queer movements, and yet we were all, me too, at least once a week, somebody was saying, "This blows my mind. My mind is blown. The world really is queerer than we can suppose." And that's one of my April Fool's messages to you. Although I can't communicate to you all that we learned in that, I want you to understand, whatever the particular area of interest is, that what there is to know, and the diversity of the people, and the diversity, not to mention the diversity of other animals, is mind-blowing. And the richer your appreciation of that, the better you are able to think ecologically, to think about how things are connected, and to come up with ways of doing things that take ecologies and intersections into account. And you also become much less hubristic, because once you've had your mind blown once or twice, then you start to realize something that I do want everybody out to realize how much you don't know. To be a fool. To realize, there I was, I've done LGBT activism for decades. And I know enough about it that I'm invited to teach a calculus, a university course on it, and still, so much I didn't know. So much that isn't even in not just the dominant story, but the story as told by the LGBT movement. It's much richer than that. So that's, in general, the thing that we learned. We did learn about the 300 varieties of animals. But we also learned about diversity among humans. We learned. I'm hoping it's because we have to be somewhere. Yeah. I'll just pretend that's why. Yes. So we learned about the invention of heterosexuality. We learned that heterosexuality was a relatively new invention. Now you may be saying, wait, they have to have had it for a long time, or we wouldn't exist. But I don't mean the biological act of heterosexual reproduction. I mean the idea of a heterosexual identity. The idea that your sexual orientation is one aspect of your identity, and that there's an identity called heterosexual. It was invented in Europe in the 1800s. It's a European way of thinking about humans that makes what is essentially an activity into a noun. That makes so, and this is where we started to get confusion. Sometimes when there's start to be controversies around gay questions in certain parts of the world, people will say, "Well, we don't have homosexuals here," and sometimes that's homophobia, sometimes that's bigotry, but other times it's because they don't think of that's not how to categorize people. Yes, there's plenty of people who are engaged in same-sex sexual behavior. They just don't know how to categorize homosexual. Does it make sense? The vast majority of people in the world who certainly historically, I would argue even now, the vast majority of people in the world who engage in some form of same-sex sexual activity do not think of themselves as gay or lesbian or bi. That's kind of mind-blowing. If you're coming from the perspective of the US-centered LGBT movement that assumes that this is an identity and then fits our movement into identity politics. In the same model as, say, civil rights. And obviously there's a lot of benefit to doing that. We've seen some benefits, right? I'm not saying that's a bad way of looking at it, just saying it's not the only way of looking at it. Does that make sense? So that's one thing we learned. We learned, and then we started thinking, look. There's all the gay animals, and then there's all the gay people. Oh my gosh, and gender. Right? We also learned that prior to the conquest that brought European-style thinking about sex and gender, globalized that along with capitalism, people in the world mated and courted and constructed their families in a blooming diverse ways. And they constructed their gender systems, if they had a gender system, in a variety of ways. Not just binary, but 3 gender systems, 4 gender systems, 5 gender systems. Systems in which there was a place for just about anybody. This is why, if you've heard this and you didn't quite understand why it was, it's not just about race. When some native people here in the States elect not to call themselves LGBT, but call themselves Two-Spirit instead. It's not just about native pride, it's also because this is a different way of thinking about it. And Two-Spirit is a different way of thinking about the whole question. Does that make sense? And this is why we also learned that while globalization then, what else did we talk about? Oh, right, so we learned how the conquest brought homophobia to the Americas, right? You know that, yes? And along with cows and pigs and animal agriculture, which was not practiced by Native Americans, along with the two-gender system, along with the economic underpinnings of what will become capitalism, all in the course of what can only be called a war on nature. And oh, why wasn't there the conquest? I mean, why did these Europeans all come over here anyway? Well, because Europe was deforested and overpopulated. Because of this focus on reproduction. Everybody's got to be straight and have babies. So they just, and nature is just something we use. And animals are just part of that, we just use it. So that whole mindset comes over here, along with the conquest, right? And I would argue, and we sort of figured out, that that's how homophobia leads to global warming. And maybe we can't solve any of those problems without at least keeping the others in mind. So what then do I mean by queer and animal liberation? In the 70s, when I was 17, I was a co-coordinator of the Gay People's Alliance at my college. And it was the first gay state college gay organization in my state. And that name, Gay People's Alliance, that was like right there in the 70s. We had lots of gay liberation fronts and this and that. And it said liberation rather than rights. But I argued at one point that we should call ourselves the Queer Liberation Front. And I fell out of that thing. Nobody would take me serious, but I'm serious. And eventually, I'm just telling you a little bit now, because at this point, including that Q and LGBTQ and even saying Q is this sort of nature, we've lost the queerness of it. I was really serious. I'm a queer. And so while I'm not going to put down our tendency to just sort of use Q as a catch-all, I want to talk about what does it mean to queer something? What does it mean to queer something? Anybody know what does it mean to queer something? Maybe not straight. Go at it in a sideways way. Maybe take into account spider webs rather than trying to make everything like a pipeline. Am I making any sense here? Maybe being a fool sometimes, for love, getting crushed on all the wrong people. So queering, when we started to talk in academia about queering this, that, and the other, what we meant was like to look at it from a different vantage point. To twist it around a bit. To not be so straightforward. To not try to conquest it. And so when I talk about queering animal liberation, what I'm talking about is queering, making all of our movements about relationships. And making all of our relationships vitalized by queerness. These all run into each other. I'm running into liberation. What am I trying to talk about? I'll just stop with that for queering. So what I'm talking about is not if I want to liberate animals, then I'm going to understand I can't just liberate animals like that, right? I'm going to have to circle around that. I'm going to have to come at that from lots of different angles. Animals, though, what am I talking about? Not just non-human animals. Humans are animals. So when I'm talking about clearing animals, I'm not just talking about changing ways we think about what gets called animal rights or animal advocacy. I'm talking about clearing everything, including human rights. I like to think of human rights as a subset of animal rights, right? Because humans are animals, right? So we've got animal rights, and then human rights is a subset of that. And if we think of human rights as a subset of animal rights, then we don't make certain mistakes. If we think of human rights as a subset of animal rights, then we don't make the mistake of thinking, then we understand there's lots of subsets of animal rights, and we won't make the mistake as animal advocates of thinking that animals all want the same thing. We'll recognize that animal rights is a really diverse question for animal liberation. And that just as humans want different things, maybe, than that humans maybe want different things than orangutans, right? Some of the things are the same, but some are different. They like food a lot more than we fishes also want something different. Does that make sense? And then, but what am I talking about liberation? Okay, here's the other thing that Jean Paul and Jean Claude taught me, and then I'll stop because I think we're running out of time and people are running out of patience. Remember what he had to go through? That was pretty deep, right? Now think about people, human people. So in lots of places in the world, it's been illegal to engage in same-sex behavior, yes? It still is in some places, right? There's laws against sodomy, or whatever they call it. Sometimes even the death penalty. Did that stop it? Did that stop people getting it on with people of the same sex? Please shake your head no. All right, and there have been laws here in the United States and elsewhere against miscegenation, race fixing. Did that stop it? Okay, so that actually teaches us the same thing that Jean Paul and Dr. Claude taught me, which is that Eros is super powerful. Eros is so powerful, our wish to be connected, and not just in getting it on, though that's a part for many of us, but our wish to have meaningful relationships, connections with those we love, that is so powerful that we have plenty of documented instances of people risking death and worse. That's our most important resource as activists. And it's a renewable. If we liberate. So what I'm talking about when I'm talking about queering animal liberation is liberating Eros from all of the socially constructed desires that have got it locked in, right? We live in a world right now that is the end result of that process of colonization that I mentioned. We live in a world right now where, for most people, desires have been channeled into very sharply circumscribed groups. And even those who seem to have broken out a little bit because they're gay still want pretty much the same thing: the wedding, the destination wedding. Right? To me, that is sad. So we live in a world where even queer Eros now has gotten locked in, a lot of it, to an economy of getting and spending. An economy where people spend their lives getting the money to buy relatively illusory pleasures. and genuine connection. And I don't just mean getting it on, I mean genuine connection with friends, genuine connection with comrades, genuine connection with nature, genuine connection with other animals. All of that, you must know, so much more rewarding than the destination way. And so, when I talk about queering animal liberation, I'm talking about liberating all of us from socially constructed desires, including the desire to eat other animals, including the desire to shoot other animals. Is that really what people want? Or is it what they've been steered to want, right? It is a culture. You don't grow up with a taste for double cheeseburgers wrapped in bacon. Advertisers inculcate that in you. And even before that, your parents, who were also enculturated, teach you, right? I talked about animals and humans being animals, and I talked about there being different kinds of animals. One of the beautiful things, there aren't a lot of them, but one of the beautiful things about human animals is something called behavioral plasticity. Why is there so much diversity among people? Because humans have a remarkable level of plasticity, ability to do things in different ways. Right? I mean, think of it. Think of all the different ways that human animals have constructed their habitats. All of the different ways that humans have eaten, clothed themselves, made up games, made up music. We can do things in made families. We can do things in lots of different ways. And so that means that we're not locked in to the way things are now. We really aren't. There's nothing in our genes that makes us eat double hamburgers wrapped in bacon or go to war. There's nothing in our genes that does that. It's just that at this point our desires have been so seized that most of us just go with the program. I'm talking about the opposite of the program. I'm talking about going with the flow of nature. Because the thing about arrows is that it wants the same thing that nature wants. And that's what I mean then by queering animal liberation. If you're interested in joining me in that, then what you can do is do something tomorrow for April Fool's Day. And then I'll stop talking because we're totally out of time, I'm sure. Thank you very much. And there's books if you want them, and I'm here if you want to talk to me personally. And there's still some more mac and cheese, it looks like.
Copies of the book for sale, $16 to take
But want to sign up for either the Divine Sanctuary email list or the Vassar Animal Rights Coalition email list, or if you're interested in becoming vegan and would like your own personal mentor, you can sign up for that too. And then, yeah, definitely take mac and cheese because otherwise you have to party it.
Thank you all for coming.